So we've already learned how to solve an equation, and now we're going to do equations that are a little bit more complicated. They are two-step equations, and as you would guess, they are equations that need two steps to solve them. But even though these are a little bit more complicated and they are two steps instead of one step, you follow the same steps as before. You follow the same procedure as before. And so I want to get in the habit of making this chart. What is happening to the variable? In this case, it's the variable a, which is right there. And then reversing this and flipping all the inverse operations to figure out what we are going to do. Okay? And so we ask ourselves, what is happening to a? Well, the first thing that's happening to a is it's being divided by 4. So divide by 4. And then the next thing that's being done to a after this happens, divided by 4, then it's being added by 2. So add 2. And so you literally just reverse the order. And so if I'm reversing the order as I'm going down here. Okay, and then I'm flipping the inverse operations, so instead of adding, I'm going to subtract the same amount, 2. And then instead of dividing by 4, I'm going to multiply by 4. And so this is literally what we are going to do to solve this equation. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do is subtract 2. So, and remember, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So we're going to be subtracting 2 on both sides. We're going to subtract 2 here and subtract 2 here. And when I say both sides, I'm talking about both sides of this equal sign. So you can imagine a little barrier right there, and whatever you do to one side of that barrier has to be done to the other. Okay? So we subtract 2, and when we balance the equation, okay, we're going to get 6 minus 2, which is 4. The a over 4 is not being affected, and then 2, positive 2 minus 2 gives me a plus 0. So I can write the plus 0 there, but it doesn't do anything for me, so I don't even have to write that. Okay? So now we have done that. We have subtracted 2. Now we have to multiply by 4, and again we're doing it to both sides of the equation. So we're going to multiply by 4, and we're going to multiply by 4. Okay, and notice that the 4 cancels with the division by 4 right here. That's the whole point we're doing it. So those go away. And we're just left with an a on the right and a 16 over here. And now we have done this step, and here is our solution. Okay. Now here's another example. Negative 6 plus x divided by 4 equals negative 5. So what is happening to x? Well, we set this up exactly like we did before. The first thing that's happening to x is what? It's being divided by 4. Okay, and then the second thing that's happening to x after all of that, it's being added by a negative 6, which is the same thing as saying subtracting 6. Okay, subtract, oh, I guess I didn't even have to write subtracting, but just subtract 6, just like that. Subtract 6. I'll move this over. Got to make your notes look neat. So subtract 6, okay? And really what I'm saying there, the reason this is subtracting 6 is I'm just commuting these two back and forth here. So really we could just rewrite this as x over 4 minus 6 equals negative 5. These are the same thing. If you notice, all I did here was I just commuted those back and forth, and so that's where I'm getting this subtracting 6 from, okay? So if this is what we're going to do, we're going to reverse it, okay, to figure out what we're going to do. So the first thing we're going to do, instead of subtracting 6, we're going to add 6. And then after that, instead of dividing by 4, we're going to multiply by 4. Okay? So here we go. So we're going to add 6, okay? And we're doing it to both sides. And here's my equal sign, so this is where my little boundary is right there, okay? So if I add 6 to this side, I have to add it over here. And when I balance the equation, the x over 4 is not changing. The negative 6 plus 6 goes away. And then negative 5 plus 6 is a positive 1. So I've done that. Now I need to multiply by 4, and again I'm doing this on both sides of the equation, so I'm going to multiply there, and I'm going to multiply there. And notice that over here the 4 and the 4 cancel, and that's the whole reason we're doing this. X is being divided by 4, so if we multiply by 4, those two things, those inverse operations, are going to cancel each other out. And so I have x, and over here 1 times 4 is just 4. And now I've done that, and there is my answer. Okay, a few more examples to do. Okay, so what's happening to x in order? And remember that when you have a situation like this, where you have some stuff that is in a denominator, some addition or subtraction that's in the denominator, that's locked in until further notice. So x plus 5, the first thing that's happening to x is it's being added by 5. Okay? And then the second thing that's happening to it is divide by 6. Then it's the division by 6. So if that's the case, then we're going to reverse that. And so we are going to multiply by 6 and then subtract 5. Okay? So instead of dividing by 6, we're going to multiply by 6. Instead of adding by 5, we're going to subtract 5. So multiplying by 6, and we're going to do that on both sides of the equation. So here's a 6, and here's a 6. On the left side of the equation, 6 times negative 1, and really I should add that like that, so that you know it's 6 times negative 1. Again, we're multiplying by 6. So 6 times negative 1 is negative 6. Over here, the 6 cancels. Multiplying and dividing by 6 cancels, so we have 5 plus x. I've done that. Now I'm going to subtract 5. Subtract 5. And now here we have negative 11, and 5 minus 5 goes away, and we're just left with x. We've done that step, and there is our solution. Okay, so what is happening to n in this example? Well, the first thing that's happening to n is it's being added by 5. Remember, these parentheses are kind of grouping this in, because parentheses are the first thing in order of operations. So the first thing that's happening is we're adding 5. Okay, and then the second thing that's happening is that after we add 5, then we're going to multiply by 2. Okay, and so if we are reversing this to figure out what to do, then the first thing we're going to do is divide by 2 from this step, and then subtract 5. Okay, so if we're dividing by 2, I'm going to divide by 2 over here and over here. Okay, here these 2's cancel. I'm just left with n plus 5. And here, negative 2 over 2 gives me a minus 1. So I've done this step. Now we're going to subtract 5. And so these plus 5 minus 5 goes away, and I'm just left with n. And then negative 1 minus 5 is a negative 6. And I've done that step, and there's my answer. Okay? Last example. So stick with me for the last example here. What's happening to b? Well, the first thing that's happening to it, and notice the difference here. Notice that this 8 plus b, this is not in the numerator. Only the b is in the numerator. So we're not approaching it like we did this one, where everything was in the numerator. Okay? Okay, so the first thing that's happening here, okay, is b is being divided by negative 4. So the first thing is divide by negative 4. And then after that happens, then we're adding 8. Okay, so again, we're going to reverse this steps. So the first thing we're going to do is subtract 8 and then multiply by negative 4. Okay, so let's do it. So we're subtracting 8. We're going to subtract 8 and subtract 8. And again, don't lose track of the equal sign right here. It's just coming down like that, and that's my little tipping point. So the 8 minus 8 goes away, and I'm left with that. And then over here, 5 minus 8 leaves me with a minus 3. So I've done that step. Now we're going to multiply by negative 4. So I'm multiplying by negative 4 here and here. Okay? And so over here, the negative 4 and the negative 4 cancel. And I'm left with b. And over here, negative 3 times negative 4 is a positive 12. And I've done this step. And there is my answer.